Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. So my name's Tom Butchers. I'm the security strategy and advisory lead at Bytes. So I'm one of the sponsors of this event and a key technology and services supplier to the UK and global customers. And I'm joined today by Rafe Pilling from Sophos. Rafe.
Hey Tom, yeah, I'm really excited to be part of this conference. I think it's a really important area for retail to focus on. So from my perspective, Rafe Pilling, I lead threat intelligence production for the Sophos Counter Threat Unit. My team operates globally, looking at everything from organized cybercrime through to state-sponsored activity.
Brilliant. Thank you. Right. Well, I suppose the purpose of today and the format, we're just going to spend 20 minutes having a bit of an informal fireside chat rather than too much of a lecture or a presentation, just to go into some of the common themes that we've been hearing, especially around AI today. So I suppose to kick us off, Rafe, I mean, please can you expand a little more on your background, who you are, what you do, and the kind of customers and challenges that you're working with and on day to day?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been with Sophos, I guess, for 20 years, although I did come through the SecureWorks acquisition. But I've been looking at uh, cybersecurity attacks across a range of verticals. I've always worked for a managed security services provider, and as a result, we get visibility globally and across a whole range of verticals. And so, being able to sort of witness firsthand how those attacks have evolved over the years. I got really interested in the threat intelligence side of things about 15 years ago. Have worked various areas, including sort of state-sponsored threats from Russia, Iran, North Korea, and now, yeah, as I said, lead that team globally. And we are in the sort of very privileged position to draw on a broad range of data sources available within Sophos, everything from customer telemetry to incident response engagements, all of the MDR investigations that we do, third-party reporting, some of our own proprietary data sources, and my team gets to pull all that together and provide our customers threat intelligence on what we see happening and advise, more broadly, executive teams and work with the media from time to time.
Amazing. So, I mean, that sounds like a job where you're wearing several hats and engaging with multiple different stakeholders internally, externally all the time. And I imagine it's probably never been busier, right? I guess from my perspective as a partner representative, we're hearing so much noise around AI, changing the way we work, changing the threat landscape, changing the way we defend. I guess from what you're actually seeing kind of at the coalface and certainly working with retail customers day to day, how much of that noise is real, would you say, and how much is still mostly hype?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, that is the core thing that many CISOs and others want to know in sort of some of those closed door conversations is like, what is
Mm,
the real sort of ground truth of what's going on? I think a lot of the hype and discussion we've seen has been forward looking. It's sort of trying to predict the future, what might be coming, how fast is it coming, and I think that's a big thing people are sort of concerned about. What sort of time frames are we dealing with? The reality is, in terms of day-to-day attacks, the vast majority of things we see remain very much the same, human-driven, with a lot of the same tools and tactics. But what we do see creeping in, and it varies depending on different areas of the threat landscape, are different adversaries, threat actors, hackers using AI to try and enhance, scale, and improve their operations. And so a lot of these are the existing cybercrime groups, for example, looking at how they can weave various generative technologies into their operations to make things faster. And that might be writing new malicious tools, or it might be reviewing large amounts of stolen data that they've taken from an organization, for example. So that's really where we're at. But we shouldn't be complacent. This is a whole area that's moving very quickly. There's recent research from the AI Security Institute talking about the sort of doubling time in capability from some of these large language models, and how it's every sort of 4 months now it seems that sort of capabilities are getting better and better. So we need to be sort of continually monitoring for that, seeing looking for those early indicators that things are changing in a way that they haven't changed before.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I suppose sitting as that, you know, again in that partner space, certainly the noise and the questions and the requests that are coming from our customers and what we're seeing, it's obviously increasing. But for me, and I think for us, it seems to split into two camps, and we have this, this new threat vector or threat vectors where AI as new tooling, where the kind of the traditional controls aren't able to address those risks. But then also this other one, which I think is slightly more mature, is how is AI kind of being a force multiplier against existing attacks and similarly with defense? So how is it making things we're already worried about and trying to control faster and all of that sort of thing? So yeah, I definitely agree that whilst there is an awful lot of hype and noise out there, it's also very real. Yeah, we are at a bit of a paradigm shift in this space. I think one of the things that we hear a lot is about AI. It's lowering the barrier for cyber criminals. We hear about vibe coding applications and vibe coding ransomware and making things very easily accessible. Do you think this means that we're seeing a whole new wave of attackers sort of just having a go at retail? Or do you think it's more that the usual suspects are just getting better tools now?
I think we'll probably see a bit of both. At the moment it'll be sort of 80-90% in that sort of the usual suspects getting better with those tools. But there will, we do expect that there will be sort of a new wave of perhaps sort of new entrants to this market that will be sort of AI native. They will grow up in that era, and those will be their sort of go-to tools. I mean, I think an interesting example is not necessarily just directed at retail. It's sort of a global issue, but is sort of the North Korean IT workers threat. So they've gone from just using traditional methods to apply for jobs and fraudulently obtain employment with organizations, to then leveraging generative AI where they can to try and sort of fast track creation of online profiles, of work histories, of CVs, even using digital filters to try and sort of pass interviews. And now we see them trying to scale that operation by using sort of LLMs and language models as prompts during interviews for folks that don't necessarily have the IT skills, so that they can bring a greater pool of workers in to that sort of scam and scale the potential revenues that they make by getting through interviews and then sort of the follow-on work augmented with language models. And we do see more and more sort of scripting and malware that has some signs that it's potentially been developed using a language model. We're still sort of figuring out exactly what those tells look like, and our first priority is just identifying malicious code anyway. So it's sort of a secondary concern to that, but trying to gauge exactly the degree to which criminals and others are using AI to augment their operations is an interesting thing to look at.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if we haven't seen, I definitely advise people to look out for some videos that have been made available online of these fraudulent job interviews where it's now, hold three fingers in front of your face, or maybe make some less than complimentary comments about Kim Jong-un. I think it is fascinating that we're entering into this world now where, yes, of course, it's AI driven attacks and it's speed, but it's also I think it's making the barrier of understanding between the kind of the normal remit of an IT security team. We've got identity questions now that we never really had before. Previously IT would onboard a new starter and they'd give them their permissions based on what they were needing, and then that was the JML process. Now it's increasingly becoming IT's and security's remit to check that the person who's the new starter is in fact who they are. Maybe be part of those interviews, running deepfake simulation technology and all the rest of it. The IT security purview seems to be growing significantly.
I mean, absolutely. And that, I mean, you made the comment earlier about kind of new problems requiring sort of new solutions, and some of them not quite being there yet. And I think that's that whole sort of deepfake piece and detecting those fraudulent applicants and doing that across the entire sort of pre-hire, onboarding, and post-hire piece
Mm.
is, there's still a lot of different business units involved in that, whether it's sort of HR, finance, and then whoever happens to have hired that remote employee. Is one of the reasons that our CISO group put out a sort of a CISO toolkit for this. It's on the Sophos website to talk about how we'd address this internally, some of the lessons learned, controls like pragmatic controls we put in place,
Mm.
and just give us sort of a support toolkit there. But yeah, I mean, dealing with things like deepfakes and identity verification, and yeah, your digital identity has just become incredibly important now. And I mean, there have been a number of attacks recently on large organizations that have involved stolen credentials, and being able to use those to gain access to cloud services and then pivot from those cloud services to other
Mm.
organizations. So digital identity, massively important area these
Yeah.
days. And yeah.
No, absolutely. I mean, we hear that, the phrasing identity, it feels a little bit to me, it's the oldest new hot topic. It's sort of never gone away. The new perimeter and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
Why do you think retail is such a target when it comes to those sorts of identity-based attacks? What in your experience, what does those sorts of attack look like when they play out? Walk me through that.
I mean, there's a few. So one of the things we tend to tell organizations is that when we see these attacks, they tend to start opportunistically. Now there are some caveats to that. So if we look at some of the retail attacks in 2025 on some large, well-known high street brands, those weren't entirely opportunistic because they began with social engineering, and probably a good degree of research by the individuals involved, using dark web resources and sort of regular internet to understand as much information as they could about the organizations they were targeting and some of their employees, so that they could get on the phone with help desk staff and kind of go through that. We call it social engineering, that sort of con approach to sort of blagging their way into the organization
Mm.
and getting that access. And so um, there's a number of things at play there. We can, potentially sort of credentials that have been stolen in sort of previous incidents make their way into the dark web, and they can be picked up by other criminals and used in these attacks, or used as a way of adding credibility to an approach. If you phone up a help desk person and you happen to know the previous
Mm.
password for that account, that lends credibility. Retail, more than many organizations, more than many industries, has a very public persona. There's a lot of customer
Mm.
interaction. There's a lot of points within retail where they are interacting with customers, and ultimately they want to do a good job. They want to help customers, and that's sort of at the forefront of their mind. Be helpful, do what you can, and so that can also be taken advantage of by nefarious individuals who know how to work that
Mm.
process, and circumvent some of those identity controls and get into those organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's an interesting sort of an irony in that we're talking about how certainly with regards to attacks and AI-driven attacks, it's making everything move faster and more efficiently. But actually, a lot of these attacks, even when they're using quite sophisticated processes and tactics, techniques, and procedures, still rely on having that kind of downtime at the beginning where there's that dwelling within an environment, picking up information, scanning and reviewing the employees, what typical usage looks like, maybe trying to hop around, finding their ways to more juicier people, juicier credentials. So there's still a level of time that's needed. Um, I think it's interesting with this. We talk about moving fast and all the rest of it. Do you think that changes the game a little bit when it comes to, again, certainly in the retail industry, how these organizations need to think about their teams and their processes? Is there fundamental change needed in how security teams operate?
I mean, speed is definitely a key part of this. I mean, even ransomware attacks, we would look at over the past few years, the time between initial entry and ransomware deployment was dropping to just under 24 hours. In some cases, a couple of hours, maybe even less than an hour. So AI assisted intrusions will only sort of compress those phases. It makes it easier for threat actors to run some tooling, get back the results, maybe run that through a language model, and get to, whatever's the next phase much faster. And there have been a few sort of public incidents, and we have some private examples where we've seen threat actors doing that kind of orchestration to compress the time between phases, which can include things like, reviewing the results of a set of stolen credentials to find the highest privilege credentials, or reviewing documents like network diagrams and other sort of technical information to figure out how you want to navigate through the network, and how do you get to domain administrator, or where's the most important data held. And then once data has been stolen, reviewing that data to understand what might make a good set of things to sort of tell the victim about, to really sort of personalize that hook in terms of the impact of the incident, and try and sort of coerce them into making a payment. So I think collapsing some of those phases in what is already being quite fast, and that's where sort of AI on the other side, from the defender perspective, is going to be absolutely critical in being able to detect, protect, and respond much, much faster.
Absolutely agree, and I think that brings us neatly onto how do we use AI for the side of the good guys now. So we hear a lot about AI being used as a sort of a force multiplier for organizations in a preventative and a security sense. One of those phrases, agentic SOC, seems to be the flavor of 2026. I guess again, in your experience, where are you seeing AI, be it from an LLM or an agentic perspective, or just in the round, where are you seeing it making a real difference? Especially for those teams that sit at retailers that maybe they're not big teams. For me, it seems like AI has potential to massively increase efficiency, and we haven't got big teams behind. But it'd be good to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that will be one of the areas where this is a massive game changer. I've never heard anyone say we've got too many security people in our staff, or we have too many SOC analysts, and not enough events to look at. It's usually the other way around. Huge amounts of data to deal with. And that's throughout the entire cycle. So, even as a leading MDR provider, we have vast quantities of data that need to be processed. Artificial intelligence and machine learning have always been part of the sort of Sophos stack, and now some of the more advanced things like large language models can really help, I think, in the analyst layer, reduce the time it takes to understand what is going on in an instance. So feed in the inputs from a range of alerts, a range of different telemetry sources, a range of different security controls, bring that together and explain to an analyst very, very quickly what is going on, how this is developing, and give them the opportunity to make a decision about, what's the next response action we're going to take. Are we isolating a host? Are we notifying the incident response team? Are we collecting forensic data, et cetera, et cetera? So I think that's where we'll see the sort of big impact from an agentic SOC perspective. It's one of those great phrases where sort of everyone says it, and I think no one's entirely sure what it means. And there's
what it means,
an aspirational view of it, and sort of what's the real world reality. But very quickly, these kind of technologies are becoming embedded into security solutions, certainly into things like Taegis and Software Central. Been lots of great applications of AI to make it easier for the analysts that we have and that customers have to interpret what's going on. And over time, there'll be more and more of that kind of analysis load transferred to AI agents to really speed up the tempo at which sort of defensive security operations can be conducted.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's again the idea of having things working faster, more effectively, being able to do some of the grunt work as well. I think allow the people to do the interesting stuff. I think this is kind of where we bring it all together. And I think now when it comes to that practical advice and moving through that noise, I guess for the people out there that are sort of hearing this and going, great, this sounds maybe a bit scary, but also quite exciting. What do I now have to do from a practical sense as maybe a head of IT, a head of SOC, a head of security? And I think especially for me, how do we go out and say, this is not just the practical, but maybe the grounded approach? I mean, from my perspective, I think whilst this changes the game a bit, the standard things you can and should always have been doing still apply. Making sure you have robust identity processes, making sure that you're looking to address prioritization for risks, and fundamentally look to use services. I think there's a reason that like yourselves, significant managed security services sit out there, and it's because teams, apart from in the very largest organizations, just don't have the resource and capability. So yeah, I guess from a practical sense, what would be the advice you'd give to people looking to go away from this?
No, so I thoroughly agree with everything you said there. The fundamentals still apply, whether it's a human performing the attack or just human in the loop with an agentic sort of overlay. It's still the same tools, tactics, procedures being deployed in these intrusions. So all of the basics apply when it comes to cyber hygiene, things like multi-factor authentication, phishing resistant authentication protocols. I mean, there are areas like patching. There's been a lot of discussion recently about models making it easier to find vulnerabilities and create exploits. And I think in the short term, there will be some pain. But I also think we could look forward to a world where software in general is just better written with fewer vulnerabilities. And so, organizations already struggle with patching. That still remains a sort of a key focus, particularly internet-focused pieces. But hopefully over time, the quality of software will improve, and there will just be less bugs that need patching or can be exploited. So yeah, key messages, focus on the fundamentals of cyber hygiene. And I think, as you said, know what you're good at and what you have the resources for internally, and partner for the rest. There are lots of different disciplines and specialist skill sets in cybersecurity, and very few companies have the resources to hire them all internally. So, making use of specialist partners, MDR providers, that sort of thing really can level up your defenses.
Definitely agree. And I guess, that's really, it comes down to the same like that is, you say, know your strengths, know your weaknesses, partner correctly. And yeah, both from a Bytes and a Sophos perspective, I'm sure we'd love to help anyone who wants to reach out.
Absolutely.
Rafe, thank you so much. And thank you, everybody. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the expo.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks all.